breaking even's a really good metric to all be working to as an organization, because it means two things. It means more revenue in the door and reduction of costs. And actually having that North Star that's there that says, this is where we're aiming to go. And everyone should be asking themselves every day, whether you are a salesperson, whether you are a product person, or whether you are in technology some way, you should be asking yourself, this piece of work I'm doing today, how does it help us get to break even?
Welcome to the Product Agility Podcast, the missing link between agile and product. The purpose of this podcast is to share practical tips, strategies, and stories from world-class thought leaders and practitioners. Why, I hear you ask? Well, I want to increase your knowledge and your motivation to experiment, so that together we can create ever more successful products. My name is Ben Maynard, and I'm your host. What has driven me for the last decade to bridge the gap between agility and product is a deep-rooted belief that people and products evolving together can achieve mutual excellence.
Have you ever found yourself in an organisation where you just seem to be very customer-centric? And what that tends to mean is that the salespeople are out selling any old crap. I know that I've worked with many clients where this has been the case, and the level to which it enables good product people to do good product work was always severely hampered. This problem of being extraordinarily sales-led leads to a lack of good product management rigor at times, and all manner of other problems. And it's those problems that we're going to be exploring today with Mike Moran, who is product director for The Flow. Now, Mike is somebody that I met way back in an insurance company named Kaveh Insurance, and we've remained in touch since then. As Mike, I think it's fair to say your career has just gone from strength to strength. So it's really brilliant to have you on the pod, and
It's
it'd be
great to be here,
awesome for our listeners if you could. Oh, thank you. Good to have you here. And it'd be awesome if you could give our listeners a little overview of your journey to becoming product director at The Flow.
Oh, thanks, Ben. It's great to finally be on the Product Agility podcast. So I'm Mike Moran. I come from a telecommunications background, and I did some engineering, accidentally fell into product, where I worked for O2 on O2 Drive, O2 Home, a bunch of other stuff that we were doing, which kind of led me to insurance. I think most people I've met in insurance accidentally fall into insurance and never manage to get out. So I worked on a lot of IoT, smart cities kind of stuff, and that led me to telematics enabled products such as telematics enabled car insurance or connected car insurance. From then, moved to Kaveh, where I met you, Ben, and got a lot deeper into the world of insurance, looking at claims and all that kind of that good stuff. And then found my way into The Flow, which is a nice mix of being an insurtech, understanding the technology side of things and the IoT side of things, and selling products back into insurers to help them with the problems that they've got. So it's been a bit of a radical journey into insurance. I've been in insurance now for about 7 or 8 years, and I see it as one of them environments that still hasn't changed hugely. There is a bit of digital technology, but the biggest probably advancement that we've ever seen in car insurance is probably price aggregator websites like Compare the Market. Other than that, it's still pretty similar to when I passed my driving test when I was 18.
This is what I find really interesting, is because when you think of insurance, what you're doing is you're selling a promise, and you're promising that you'll help people out when they get into trouble. And so when you think about how can technology make that better, I struggle to immediately see how technology and insurtech can really be a huge kind of leap forward for insurance, because it's basically people giving you money to cover their arses should something go wrong. But then when you start thinking about telematic, that's an Internet of Things. That's where it starts to get very nerdy. So for those of people that perhaps don't know anything about telematics and how it can relate to car insurance, could you give us a little bit of background there?
Yeah, so The Flow was founded 10 years ago, and we do predominantly smartphone telematics. Telematics is the capture of kind of driving data that can be used in various different ways. It's probably been a really dirty word in the industry these days, because everyone assumes kind of black box insurance, that kind of stuff, with teenagers and having really expensive insurance policies. So The Flow was founded on this problem that to run a telematics program, you had to get physical boxes fitted to cars. No one really wanted that. And actually, through smartphones and the ability to use the GPS sensors, the accelerometer sensors, that you could use that to help insurance out and help reduce people's insurance, help make them safer drivers, which reduces their risks. Like you said, that you sell a promise, right? You sell a promise to help pay out a claim in an issue that a customer's had. And that data can be used alongside your traditional data, which has generally been kind of age, sex, vehicle you drive, and where you live, to work out what kind of price you're going to pay on car insurance.
That's fascinating. So it's not only does it then collect data which you can use for insurance purposes, I suppose it's also given a huge amount of feedback to the driver about their performance as a driver.
Yeah, absolutely. And no one likes to necessarily see how good a driver they are at times, because most people think they're a great driver. There's little things like, for example, if you take a lot of Bluetooth calls while you're driving, you are road legal, but that doesn't mean that it's less of a risk. It's less of a risk if you're not taking any calls and you're concentrating on the road. In the same way, if you had 5 people in the car, really loud music on, we've all seen the scene from Wayne's World where they played Bohemian Rhapsody. You're probably quite distracted if that was going on. There's a thing called combined operating ratios, which is basically a measure of profitability in insurance. So if your combined operating ratio is above 100%, you are losing money. And the average combined operating ratio for most motor insurers these days is about 110%. So for every £1 they get in, they spend £1.10. And everyone's going, no one wants their car insurance to go up because they see it as expensive. The industry's facing problems that people don't think about, where a wing mirror 10 years ago, like everyone must remember when you used to be able to go to a garage and buy a stick-on piece of glass to repair your own wing mirror. Now they have heating elements, they have sensors, they have cameras. They're about £3,000. So if you lose a wing mirror, you may make a claim on your insurance for a wing mirror when they were like £50. There's no point. Your excess would be more than the cost of a wing mirror. The amount of costs, the expense of vehicles and that kind of stuff is really pushing the industry to have to go to a new place.
So you say what you're saying is it's ripe for this type of innovation, because clearly from what you're saying, there isn't a lot of money to be made in motor insurance if as the components get more expensive.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard a story. I was working with a US insurer and they have problems insuring Teslas. So they had a Tesla where it was an accident, straightforward accident. A guy in a Tesla went into the back of someone else and they damaged the front bumper. And in there, as part of their insurance policy, they had a like-for-like replacement. And as you can imagine, a hire car that is a Tesla is quite expensive. And it took them 6 months to get a new LiDAR sensor for the front of the vehicle. So that their insured driver is in a Tesla for 6 months at £300. The sensor for the bumper is about £10,000. By the time the claim's finished, it could be $40,000, $50,000 for a simple bumper lights. Whereas before, a bumper was a piece of plastic that popped back out. You might repaint it or get a new bumper, but it was relatively cheap and you could get the parts quickly. Now we know that there's been globally silicon shortages, so they're struggling to get chips and spare parts. So the industry's facing some tough times. Not that anyone's heart would ever bleed for insurers, because it's a grudge per purchase.
The context has changed a lot, and it does feel like when there is an opportunity, and I guess that some of the incumbents will find it difficult, which is where upstarts such as yourselves come along and try and make a difference. There's a problem in some organizations. I don't think it is, in my experience at least, I've never seen this constrained to a particular type of organization. Like you say, it's always insurers, or it's always financial institutions, or it's always retail, whatever it is. When you're having to capture some of the market, or you want to maintain some of the market, there is this thing that happens when you become very sales-led. And what I've seen as some of the big problems that one of my other clients, which actually is a huge kind of multi-billion-dollar organization, was that from a product perspective, they couldn't do shit. Basically, they couldn't make a roadmap. They couldn't pivot, because everything they did was based upon, we have won this contract and we've sold this thing. Now go and deliver against the contract. And so actually there wasn't a whole heap of things they could do. And from then the engineering teams they were working with, it wasn't even like what they were asked to do was feasible more often than not. And the way they were structured meant that it was just impossible to deliver anything. So whilst I'm not saying that sales are bad, I think being sales-led leads to a huge list of things to do, an inability to create a roadmap that you can stick to, and ultimately like diversion of any vision that you've got when it's just all about getting that next big sale. So like, given those types of problems, Mike, are they similar to the problems that you were experiencing when you began work at The Flow?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I started The Flow, the CEO was very clear that we wanted to be a product, and I like to use the term product focused organization, because if you say product led, a lot of people then assume that product make all the decisions. And salespeople, I feel for them in many ways. Their job is very difficult. They have very hard targets and they have to go out there and hustle up sales. And the thing is with sales is it's quite often a finger in the air. You can say, we've got a pipeline of X. We hope that these customers get over the line. We think we're going to make an extra 5 million this year. And that's on their back. So they have a very difficult job. And I think the tech industry as a whole, probably over the last 5 years, has really shifted as well, in terms of there was a lot of insurtechs as well as any other kind of startups where revenue was king. If you build it and you get people using it, then we'll work out the monetization later. Let's just show revenues coming in, because that means that investment cycles are easier, because we can show growth year on year, and that's already great. But the industry as well has hugely changed, that it feels like everyone I talk to, especially in the startup space, it's like we are very much now profitability led.
Is that a shift in investor expectations, do you think? Is it
I
investors
think so.
that are driving that demand?
I think there's an element of, there was a time when everyone wanted to find the next Facebook or the next Google. And if you invested in it and then it became the next big thing, the rewards were further down the line. As we know, Google and Facebook are fairly old companies now. There has been nothing as big kind of necessarily come its way in that time. And I think that's what's maybe driving the change in the landscape. I'm no expert.
It reminds me of a dot-com bubble.
Yeah.
Where people just throw money at any old company, and whether they're profitable or not. And then all of a sudden, like, it turns out none of them were profitable, but the ones that were making profit continue to be successful. So I suppose it's a similar wave that we're riding.
I think so. I remember doing some work with Monzo years ago, and their burn rate was £1 million a day in losses. And from an investment perspective, every time they opened their doors to investors, everyone was queuing up, throwing money at them, because it's like, yeah, but they're going to change the banking industry. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. We're probably 10 years on from that now, maybe 8 years on from that. And most banks have copied a lot of the features that Monzo have. Monzo have broken even and are cash positive now, but I imagine they lost a lot of money in them early years. It's a long way to making that back. And they're probably a success story. For every Monzo, there's 10 or 15 ones that got loads of money pushed into them and went under. In our space, we had a company called Wejo, who, again, huge amounts of investment. They went through investment rounds. Investors were throwing money at them for connected vehicle data, because everyone believed connected vehicle data was going to become this huge industry. And last year or earlier this year, they went under. They just ceased and disappeared. So I think there's quite a few of them, which is changing the way the investment landscape looks, which is great for product people, because from a profitability standpoint, really good product management people were all over that stuff. What am I investing? What's the return on investment? What are our base costs? What can we sell it out? What's the propensity to pay? All that kind of stuff, which is a lot of the challenges that you bring in when you come to an organization that's been very revenue focused. A lot of salespeople out there hustling up business to get, especially to get names on the book, which are really important in the early days. You say, if this large company trusts us to supply them with technology, that will help bring other people in, to then turn that boat around after X amount of years and go, we need to look at our business now and make it profitable. It's a challenge. It's a challenge. It's a slightly different mindset, and it involves a lot of close work with the sales team.
So sales-led and revenue-driven are very similar, if not the same type of concept here.
In many ways, it's go to see people, have an idea and some technology, and ask them what they want. And when they say, oh, I want this and I want this, every deal seems to come with X amount of development work or investment that's needed to get the deal over the line.
And did you find there was lots of customization that was happening in those deals that were being struck?
Tons. So when you go more product focused rather than sales focused, it's all about value propositions, making sure you understand the industry problems and you have a bunch of tech capabilities or product capabilities. and then looking at the market segments you are selling into and making sure that you are arming the sales guys with good quality value propositions to take and say, look, we know you've got this problem or this problem. This is how our suite of products help you overcome that problem.
It reminds me of a person who I interviewed in Portugal, productized, who I said I'd like to call her my friend. I don't think we're friends yet, but a lady named Patricia, who leads the product management academy for her company, OutSystems. And I was asking her, like, why is your CEO so mad keen on investing in product people so much? They're not a huge organization, yet they've got a whole academy for product people.
Wow.
And to have amazing speakers and amazing training. And I said, but why? Like, why this decision? She was like, our CEO understands that if we get great product people, it will lead to profitability.
And it's key to put the right kind of processes and everything in place there. So there is lots of good ideas that people believe are good ideas from a small conversation. So you get a sales guy, they go out, they talk to someone who is a decision maker at a large insurer, for example. Now, in the B2B2C world and selling software as a service, actually, we are very reliant on our revenue model for the product that our customer sells to the market for it to be good, because we get paid for things like billable users. So if they put a product in market, no one likes it, no one buys it, they don't make any money, and neither do we. So it's not like we're necessarily getting paid regardless of what happens to that end customer piece. So we supply a number of kind of white label apps, that kind of stuff, which give an end user experience. So we have to try and articulate to our customers why this end user experience and this kind of proposition that they put out would be viable in the market and why they should go down that route, and then help manage it through there. But you don't have the control over the C part. So you don't have control over their messaging, their marketing, how they put the product out there. And that's one of the most difficult things sometimes, because especially with an industry like insurance, is if you come from more of a tech side of things, you might be bringing concepts that are hard for the insurance industry to understand, which makes it increasingly hard for them to market it and understand how they put it out in market for it to be a success. But that's changing quite rapidly. That we've got a number of customers doing some really funky things. We're working really closely with a company, Pirelli. They're not just a company, they're fairly big, on tires as a service and that kind of stuff, and how telematics can enable them pieces. But what was important for us is to set up some frameworks. So when I started in the organization, the first thing was that was really important was a front door process. How do we analyze every opportunity that we get side by side and understand the ones that are valuable and the ones that are going to have got the greatest chance of bringing a return on investment versus the ones that don't necessarily do it. So to submit something into the front door process, you had to fill out a lean canvas. I reduced the lean canvas down, because just presenting someone with a lean canvas and saying, go fill this out, when they've never seen a lean canvas, probably leads to people saying, this process is too hard, I'm going to go round the process rather than be part of the process. Mm-hmm. So I cut it right down. And then what you found is people started to get used to it. The first canvases I used to get through the door were brilliant, because the value always said things like huge. What's the value? It's massive. Absolutely massive. I need to work with you guys.
So big.
Yeah, to quantify this. Like, how do we look at what the addressable market might be for it? And then what kind of percentage do the customers we've lined up have of that addressable market? And how much do we think they can capture putting this product out there? That's probably the biggest, most difficult challenge in moving from a sales-led to a product-led organization, especially, and this is not uncommon to the flow. This is very common in loads of organizations, a few that I've been in, where if you've got very traditional kind of salespeople, they're like, just feed me what I need to do and I'll go out and open the doors and try and make things happen. So things like lean canvases and the way that we look at things differently are probably quite new concepts. And if you've never been part of that, it takes a while to get on board and get your head around it.
Yeah, because there is there's a huge education piece there. There's a knowledge gap that needs to be filled. There's skills gaps. There's motivation gaps, because people are going to be hard to be motivated to fill in a form. You know, the environment might not be set up for it. You know, there's habits that need to be broken. There's communication that needs to be made. I mean, that's not a change. But what I beguiled with in what you're saying is that you started very far. You started at the beginning, right? very far on the left of the process. So that if it's garbage in, then it's garbage out. And so then when you had salespeople going off and selling, and they were, and generally speaking, the history is that they've had a kind of as much freedom as they wanted to go and sell what they wanted. Were you then getting things that they had gone out and sold into the front door and then saying no, or were you finding a way to say that if you're going to go and sell, then you're going to be filling this in afterwards? How did you manage that change at the very beginning of things?
Yeah, very difficult. There were some things that, unfortunately, we'd landed ourselves in a position where we had to do certain things because we'd already made promises to customers. And especially when you're working with some huge companies out there, you don't necessarily want to go back on things that you've said. You end up in a position where you've got to deliver a certain feature or functionality by a certain date, which has never been estimated. So you are putting pressure on engineering teams to rush things out the door. And as you can imagine, the bits that people don't necessarily talk about, it's not just about creating a functionality. Once you create the piece of functionality, how do you provision it? How do you roll it out to customers? How is it supported? How is it maintained? Because they're all expensive bits that happen afterwards that are like an ongoing concern. So luckily, and it's not often you will say this, luckily loads of things fell over, was a dreadful customer experience, which give you some use cases to say, look, it would probably have been better to say no, even though we had promised something, than deliver something that was substandard that gave a poor service, because reputationally that makes us look poor.
It's a lovely, when you can look at something and say, just so you know, this is probably one of those things you're going to wish you'd said no to.
Yeah. And then you end up in some difficult conversations and that kind of stuff. And everyone's like, oh God, how did we end up in this situation? You're like, if we follow some of the rules and the principles that we put out there initially, we wouldn't have probably landed in this situation. Simplifying our product is also a great one, because if you are reluctant to say no to customers, everyone's got a nuance on things they want to do. And we've all been there where you want to make it as simple for yourself as possible. So what you end up with is a small organization trying to make things so customizable so that the bigger organizations don't have to do any work. And then what you end up is a snake pit of configurations and things that can possibly go wrong in there. And then what you end up with as well is you get any new sales guy and they go, so what's our product? What's the value proposition? And what's the different configurations customers can have? And I think there's probably a point where I looked at the amount of configurations we could have on our platform, and it'd be in the thousands. You could have this, and you could have this, and if you can confuse the sales guy, they're never going to be able to articulate to a customer, this is why you need this product. This is the value it drives. So simplifying that all down and just being willing to say, look, we can't supply that. We supply, this is the huge benefit it'll bring your organization, but it's not necessarily going to do this. It's very important. And it leads to a more scalable business that can scale out. You always end up with a bit of kind of imposter syndrome as a startup, where it's like, I'm talking to Direct Line are a massive company. We're 60 people. Like, if we say no to them, what kind of thing does that put out? But it's the way you say no. You say no to something, and then what you do deliver is a product that works. It does exactly what users want it to do. It's serviceable. It's reliable. And that will do you better in the marketplace than just saying yes to everything that a customer possibly asks.
Which is the sales-led approach. You want to get that revenue, you're going to say yes. And you're going to have those customizations, and it's going to cause you a world of pain. And you started to solve some of that pain by putting in that front door process. Once you'd controlled the stuff coming in, what was the next step for you?
Control the stuff coming in. And then we have to look at communication. How do we communicate things? How do we standardize? We're still not there, Ben. We've still got so much work to do. How do we standardize our messaging that the sales team and co are taking out there? Because, again, every startup, when they start, in many ways, needs a sales team to go out there and drive up any business you can possibly do so that you can start the ball rolling. So that's a position you have to be in. Once you get to a certain size, you have to move away from that. So the next phase is we're making people try and understand why product is important. And that's why I like to use the term product focused rather than product led. Product led leads to sometimes an attitude, because you have difficult conversations. I have difficult conversations every day of the week. And if you say, we're trying to be product led, people say, fine then, what do you want to do? You're the product guy. You tell me what you want to do. And he said, actually, we want to be product focused, which means we are user centric. We need to think about things in terms of the user as well as the customer. It's not just about selling a piece of technology into an insurer and saying, if you get driver scores, that's going to help you reduce the risk on your book and get rid of the people who are bad drivers and only keep the good drivers, which is going to make your business more profitable. You have to think, but who are the people who are going to buy this? And when they're using it, why is it nice for them to use? How are they going to understand the scores and the messaging so that they can be better drivers? And you're going through multiple layers of doing that when you're going through. The second phase after that is getting really clear documentation together, really clear value propositions, really clear messaging, and then working closely with the sales team to understand the market feedback that they're bringing in. Because they're out talking to customers every day, right? So they're an invaluable resource of information that you're seeing. And it's just getting them to understand the process and understand the value in it. So that when you do produce a product that you've spent time, because if you are committing yourselves to lots and lots of different products in a scenario where you've already committed to customers, so you have to deliver on them, then what are the things that you take out of there? Once you start delivering a few products that make it easier for the sales team, go out and they go, do you know what? I barely had to do a sales job. I demoed it. I said, this is the benefit. They bought it. Then they buy into the process.
So was there an element there, if I elaborate or delved a bit deeper, is that you went through a process of getting your salespeople really aligned to the vision, the people you're actually serving with this? Because I think it's easy to fall into the trap if you thought of your vision. Is it for likes of, say, Direct Line, or is it the end user? Who is it that you're ultimately serving? And what it sounds like is that you were able to help the sales team understand that this is about that user, that driver experience, and what it's going to mean to them. Because I suppose if as a driver you want to use it, then as an insurance company, you've got the data. And then the rest falls into place from there.
And there was something I said very early on to the team. So we only had a small product team at the time. And I remember saying, probably in the first week, look, currently we have a sales organization that goes out, talks to customers, signs deals, and then passes over the fence. You guys need to deliver this functionality because that's what's in the deal. I said success starts to look like when they start to see product, a function that is of huge use to them as part of that sales journey. And actually they start inviting us early on into them conversations, because the product managers for the different areas of the business and the different kind of product lines that we're selling should be, as all good product managers, you should live and breathe who your end users are, live and breathe the industry you're in, so you can go and passionately talk about the products and the problem that they solve. That came quite quickly, to be fair, Ben. Probably quicker than I expected, which then starts to take up time, right? Because you start taking product management people out of working with kind of squads and doing the kind of day-to-day product work into demos and working with customers. And that's kind of the balancing act that you also have to balance in there. But that, for me, then started to show that we were moving in that direction and people were starting to see the value of what we were trying to do.
I was talking to one of my clients yesterday, a very large bank. And one of the product owners there, who's got a significant size product to oversee or to manage, was saying that they're so overloaded with work to do that whilst he really adores user research and showing things to their stakeholders and getting the feedback, he said, right now, we just can't do it. We just can't do it because that just takes so much focus away from all the stuff we're getting our asses kicked for not delivering. So the thought of actually spending some time and getting that feedback and getting some data and then working on the roadmap and how things change and the negotiation around it. Honestly, we've got a year's worth of work to do before we get on parity with what we need to be on parity with. I'm just not going to be getting that feedback and doing that research now. And what you were saying there about that shift to being more product focused does then take people away from the delivery work. Was that a hard thing for people to get their heads around, that maybe you were doing less, but it was more valuable?
We still do too much. And every organization I've talked to says this, right? Our roadmaps have far too much stuff in. We're going to miss dates because it's impossible to do all of the things that we are doing today and do them well and do them with good quality. And that's where the kind of message is. If I would have arrived in my role day one and just said to everyone, you're filling out canvases, I'm saying no to everything. Where's the market analysis behind this? We haven't done any end user research or end user testing on this. It wouldn't have lasted very long. So we had to introduce little pieces as we went through. So yeah, there is, in our backlog, we have to look at things that we think are vital for testing in terms of end user testing and actually getting out there and doing the kind of UX research that you want to do. And there's a whole bunch of stuff where it's, do we know enough as industry professionals to get a product to market and then use things like engagement analytics to optimize and release on top of, whilst also looking at how do we pay back tech debt. Now, explaining to salespeople why we're not going to build 5 new features that help them sell and we're going to pay back tech debt is another massive challenge in the B2B to C world. It's not an exciting thing to talk about. It doesn't. Salespeople are energized by giving them something good that they believe they can sell, and they'll run 1,000 miles and get out there and talk to people, and they're amazing at doing that. You tell them probably going to park stuff for 6 months while we re-platform some stuff, which is a real-world example that we talk about, and try and explain this is why we're doing the re-platforming, also a difficult challenge to start to get over.
So when, on this process of controlling the work that's coming in, we've then communications and making sure everyone's clear on the vision and things are well documented so that there's some great resources for people to draw upon who are sending the same message. And then you're looking at the latter end of it about understanding engagement and looking at technical debt and making those trade-offs. What point in that whole journey were you able to turn around and say, this is actually working? We have turned a corner. We're really close to turning back the corner, and this is what I'm seeing that's telling me that. What was that for you?
So I think there's many bits where I'd say we're not there yet, but then as a product person anyway, the kind of mantra is nothing's ever finished. We can always iterate and improve. When I joined the organization 3 years ago, and this isn't down to the work that I've done or the product team, this is down to a joint effort across the organization from sales through to engineering. Everyone's been on an evolution journey. But we are a small company and we have some real competitors in the marketplace that are like 1,000-pound gorillas, people like Cambridge Mobile Telematics and some of the other big players in the industry. And when I first joined, I'll be honest, I was scared of any of them big competitors. If we went to an RFP against them, unless my feeling, and it was only a feeling, was unless we go massively cheaper than them, we're going to struggle to win some business against them. Their apps look nicer. Their technology appeared to be better. They had bigger product marketing teams and people around. They had budget to be going to big conferences and doing talks about why there's a lot of their stuff appeared far more advanced than ours. And in the early days, we lost a couple of contracts. I remember it being a bit of a blow. We lost a couple of big contracts that when they went to renewal for RF, they picked one of our competitors to do it. And I would say it's been a hard journey over the last 3 years, but even just in the last quarter, we've started to see contracts where we've won contracts against them 1,000-pound gorillas. And some of the things that make me believe in the success that we've had and make me think that the 3 years worth of hard work has been worth it is through the product process. I'm a huge fan of things like Kano analysis, and I think our products need a differentiating feature. They don't need all the features that our competitors have. If they have the must-haves that make it the product that it is that customers want to buy, it's got some differentiating features, and most of the other features will do okay. So we've started to win contracts against these kind of 1,000-pound gorillas that we've had. This year we went to a thing called DIA, with Digital Insurance Agenda. We did a trade show recently in the US over in Las Vegas, ITC, which is the biggest insurance tech conference in the world. And we had like a little meeting room. We were doing demos all day, which is something I love because I love to show the products that are either prototypes or the products that we've now launched this year and get that instant customer feedback. Is this something they're looking for? And we had a number of people coming into our meeting rooms going, I've been to see some of your competitors. They're all talking about you. None of our talks or demos mentioned this is better than compare X. This was just like, look, this is what we've got. This is why we think this is important. This is why we think it's going to drive value. These are the problems that we know you and the industry has. We didn't mention anyone else but ourselves. And there was a lot of talk around, these guys are all talking about you. Maybe not always in a positive light, Ben. Again, it's one of them things. I'm a firm believer if no one's talking about you, it's probably because you're irrelevant. If people are talking about you, some in a positive, maybe some trying to play down your product versus their own, that means that they're nervous about you. So it's been a long journey, but we're really getting there. And I think the relationship between the sales organization and the product organization is better than it's ever been. It's still tough. Every business that you're in, there should always be difficult conversation and kind of that natural rub that you get between departments. And product's always a difficult one because you're sandwiched between two beasts, right? You're sandwiched between technology, especially B2B2C, right, and sales. And you that middle ground, almost like a peacemaker in many ways. So there's always difficult conversation. But I think where we've been heading to and the things that we're seeing, I think we're starting to see the 3 years of hard work paying off, because product doesn't happen overnight. It takes a number of years to put the right frameworks and things in place and then start reaping the rewards in the market.
It takes time to align everyone on that vision as well, Mike. It sounds like you've made a huge step forward, and I'm excited to hear what happens in another few years' time. I would like to draw this conversation to an end because there is some other stuff that I would love to talk to you about on our next episode. Because I would love to understand more about how the day-to-day, the nitty-gritty, how you're working discovery, design sprints, how that's feeding into teams. Are they agile teams or are they not agile teams? A bit more of that element of it, because that's a particular fetish of mine. But before we do end, if you were to offer a singular piece of advice to someone that finds themselves in a situation similar to yourselves, an organization similar to how maybe you were a few years back, what is the best advice you think you could provide someone with?
If I was to do it all again, there'd be a whole bunch of things that I would change. There's a whole load of things I've learned in the last 3 years where I think if we'd have gone about that day one, my best advice to people would be to align on what the business goals and business metrics are. Work closely as a leadership team to say, these are the things that are super important to us as an organization. These are the things, these are the physical outcomes and measures that matter. And then align that across the piece, because I think it makes the conversations a lot easier. For example, us as an organization right now, our main focus is breaking even, showing that we are a profitable business. And to do that, breaking even is a really good metric to all be working to as an organization, because it means two things. It means more revenue in the door and reduction of costs. And actually having that North Star that's there that says, this is where we're aiming to go. And everyone should be asking themselves every day, whether you are a salesperson, whether you are a product person, or whether you are in technology some way, you should be asking yourself, this piece of work I'm doing today, how does it help us get to break even? Right, I'm working on paying off some tech that will reduce our AWS costs by even 5%. Brilliant. That will help bring down our fixed costs. It might be I work in HR, and I think from a people perspective, we are too light in certain areas. So therefore, I'm going to bring on some additional fixed cost, but these people are going to help us generate more revenue by X, Y, and Z. Or it might be that we're trying to reduce some of the fixed costs and we say, do you know what? We've got too many people in a certain area. Get in some metrics that you say, these are the things that we should all be trying to move as an organization that everyone can relate to, I think would be a place that if you can get to there as quickly as possible and make sure things are measured, then you're in a great place. I think the other thing that I see a lot is people will get hung up on either like a model for the measures and the key performance indicators that you're going to go for. Don't get hung up on the model. No model is perfect. Everyone can find a reason why you go, yeah, but that model doesn't account for the money we spend on having a building. But if you stick to the same model, you know that the number should trend down or trend up, and you stick to the same model and it moves in that direction, you're still doing a positive impact on there. By changing the model every time, it's like a scientific test. You're changing the constant. If you change the constant, then you don't know whether or not it was an improvement on last time. That's the place I would start, and I would push more in the early days to say, let's get really aligned on here, because then it would make the conversations either with technology or with sales a lot easier.
Awesome. Banging advice there. All right, Mike, thank you very much, man. And thank you everyone for listening. We've covered a lot of ground in the last minutes, so I hope you've enjoyed it. We will be back again next week with some more conversations with me and Mike. We're going to get into the nitty gritty. I'm keen to maybe delve a bit deeper on some of the metrics as well and how that relates to the teams and how do you get, have you been able to get team members really aligned to that as well. But that's all for next week. So thank everyone for listening. Mike, thank you very much for coming on.
My pleasure, Ben. It's been great to be here.
And we'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much.